Welcome to the show, All Things Writing. I am your host, Brian the Writer. Let me take you on a journey through my writing life and introduce you to some of the amazing talent that exists in the writing world. Whether you are looking for a little advice or just to catch an interesting interview, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All Things Writing starts now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to All Things Writing. I want to, first of all, thank you all for 2025. There were quite a few views of the show. There were quite a few interviews that we did and got posted and got watched, and that was fantastic. Shared around the Internet of Things, and I really, really do appreciate everything. I appreciate all the viewers, everybody who's willing to come on the show, the repeat guests, that kind of thing. It's been a pretty great year, to be quite honest. I did, from a writing perspective, I did a ton of shows. Actually, I sold quite a few books this year, if I'm being honest. You know, we did quite well in that category. I just think that I think it was a great year. Now, along those lines, one of the things that I think makes All Things Writing a success is the fact that I have publicists coming to me and saying, hey, would you be interested in interviewing this person? Another one of my longtime content helpers, Content Elf is a lady by the name of Rachel. Rachel was kind enough to send me the name of this next author, which I'm going to interview. The name of this author is Kelly Scarborough. Kelly says that basically kind of like sneaking through her mother's books on the bookshelf as a teenager, she kind of built this interest in royal families from kind of a young age. And oh, that was my phone. I apologize for that. She worked in the legal profession. One night, she decided to kind of paw through this book on the Swedish royal family. Now, as will happen with authors sometimes when we read things, you get captivated. And sucked down into the rabbit hole. That's happened to me right now, by the way, with a cryptid. The Parlangois down in Louisiana has got me writing a certain story that is captivating my attention. But so something similar happened to Kelly, and she sort of developed this whole storyline about the Swedish aristocracy and that kind of thing. Let me read you. She found herself essentially captivated by a young Swedish countess named Jacquette. I love that name, Jacquette. Eventually, Kelly would leave law and decided to pursue a writing career. Her debut novel is called Butterfly Games. It comes out January 20th, 2026 through She Writes Press. And it's pretty cool. It tells the story of Jacquette's youth, her love affair with the heir to the country's throne. Who doesn't like that, you know? I think we all fantasize at one point about falling in love with, you know, some royalty or something somewhere and being swept off our feet, and we end up marrying into the royal family or what have you, right? And there's profound personal implications for Jacquette and the political repercussions that come with being in love with somebody who's essentially running a royal family. So that's really, really kind of a cool premise. There's a lot of really interesting facets of this. This is, you know, I often love the idea of method actors who like literally try and become the character that they want to portray, so they learn a little bit more about it. A little bit more about the character so that they can be more effective on screen. Kelly has lock, stock, and barrel dove into this character 100%, even to the point of learning the Swedish language, which from what I understand, the Swedish language is not all that easy to learn. So that's impressive. That is dedication to a craft that's dedicated to That's dedication to the storyline that you're trying to write, the story that you're trying to tell. Always try to write your story your way. I think. I think. Yeah. I think she's got some interesting things going on with this book. But don't hear it from myself. As a matter of fact, we're going to hear it out of Kelly's mouth. As a matter of fact, Kelly, welcome to All Things Writing. Kelly.
Hi, Brian. It's great to meet you.
Oh, it's wonderful, wonderful to meet you as well. I always love it when the publicists reach out to me and say, "Hey, would you like to have this person on?" Because they do most of the work for me, which is fantastic. It just makes things as a content creator that much easier to get done. But nobody's here to listen to me talk about my process. So let's talk about you a bit. Now, for those of you in the audience who may be completely unfamiliar with your work, meeting you for the very first time, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what got you first into this storytelling mode?
Well, I'm a debut author, and I wrote a historical novel called Butterfly Games. And it's set in the Swedish royal court in Napoleonic times. And that's a part of history that's not known to most Americans. And the way I got into it was through reading. And I was a reader from earliest times. And there was a book on my mother's bookshelf called Desiree. And I still remember it. It was an old black leather hardback book. And it was a novel written in the 1950s by a German author. And it was about the woman who was Napoleon's first fiancée. And her name was Desiree, and she actually is the mother of the love interest, the male protagonist of my book. And what happened to Desiree was when Napoleon broke up with her, she went on and married one of his generals. And she was very in with the whole Napoleon family, and ultimately she became the Queen of Sweden. And the way she became Queen of Sweden was very interesting. And actually, Napoleon opposed her husband becoming Crown Prince of Sweden. It was one of the great coincidences of history. And today, those people are still the royal family of Sweden. And it was kind of a fascinating book, and they made a movie out of it. And it's really kind of a very funny, strange movie. And Marlon Brando plays Napoleon, and it's really goofy. And if you watch it on YouTube or something, it's called Desiree, and it's just so funny. And so I loved this book from the time I was a child. And many years later, I was a lawyer, and it was kind of a crazy time in my life. I was working in the middle of the night. I had a son in high school who has autism. It was just nuts. Oh. And I sat there and I was thinking about that book, and I thought, let me just entertain myself. I wonder what happened to Desiree's son, Oscar. And that was probably in 2014. And I went on Wikipedia and I looked up Oscar. He became Oscar the First of Sweden. Desiree was his mother. And what it said about him was that his true love was a young countess named Jacquette. And over the years, I always remembered the name Jacquette, and I started researching who she was and what the rumors were, the scandals were, and I just became fascinated with that part of history. When I ultimately left the practice of law, I guess I'm not the kind of girl who goes out with the ladies to lunch at the country club every day. So I sat home and started translating Jacquette's letters and decided I would write a book.
Out of curiosity, have you ever reread the book, Desiree?
Yes, and actually, Allison Pataki, Governor Pataki's daughter, wrote her own book about Desiree in 2021. Funny. Yeah. And it was quite popular, and so there is still some awareness of this character, but nothing like everybody who reads historical fiction knows about Anne Boleyn and the Tudors and all that. This was a little more of a challenge because your average person here does not know about the story.
No, and I don't think the average person follows the Swedish royal family. I knew that that dynasty was very long, though. I knew that family had been on the throne for quite some time, but I didn't know the story. Well, was it just as good as you remember?
The book,
Yeah.
um, I still loved it, but I
Mhm.
would say it's dated, like a
Okay.
lot of books
Sure.
are like that. So when I read the more modern version, I thought that was more what readers expect.
Okay.
And one of the things that really struck me about it was just the taste of the American reader for a heroine who does heroic things and a love story that has a happy ending. Those things really didn't exist in prior versions of novel writing. And
Interesting.
maybe it's because of Pixar and
Hmm.
Star Wars and the tropes that came,
Yeah.
but the more modern versions of every story are more demanding, I think, in terms of genre.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned briefly your legal background, and I've had lawyers on before. Uh, I had actually I interviewed a very interesting judge. She was a judge that retried the case of the Lindbergh baby in like her spare time. Very very good book, a lot of fun to read. Um, I'm always interested because in the lawyer background, indeed any kind of government work, you're worried about sourcing and making sure stuff is correct and perfect and that you can prove everything. So, was there a part of your lawyer career that helped shape that perspective you have as a writer? And what made you make that leap from I'm a legal writer to I'm a fiction writer?
Well, the type of law I practiced was big litigation,
Mm,
often for corporations, and it usually involved millions of documents. And that was at a time when the AI did not scan the documents and tell you what was in them. You had to do it yourself. So, um, not everybody has every talent. And my particular strength in law was not necessarily getting up and making the presentations in court. I think my best talent was taking the facts and making them into a persuasive story. And even though in law the facts had to be true and you couldn't stray at all
mhm,
from the facts, there was definitely an art to putting things together so that they were understandable, entertaining for the jury, and things like that.
yeah.
And I had always wanted to write, and I always knew that if I did write,
Mhm.
probably my best shot at being a decent writer was in kind of taking that I already knew and applying that to fiction.
I I think that's really interesting because when you talk to people who write like those kinds of legal governmental documents, things that you have to prove, you have to be able to back up with a solid persuasive argument. I find that a lot of times when we transfer those skills over, exactly what you said stands out. You have that the writer has that ability to take the facts and turn it into something that somebody else wants to read. Um, it's there's an interesting argument to be said for making something that reads like the manual to your toaster oven, make that interesting. That's a little hard to do sometimes. So I certainly understand that. Uh, when now you did some, I am going to give you all the props in the world. You did something that I think a lot of people never do. You dove into this topic. Now we're not talking like put a toe in the water. You dove head first because when you started writing butterfly games, uh, you hadn't really been to Sweden. You didn't speak the language. Um, what kind of gave you that storytelling or that confidence to turn around and write a story that was so far out of your paradigm?
I think it's stubbornness. I am a Capricorn, and the people who share my birthday all are stubborn and determined in different ways. You have Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, you have Princess Catherine from England, and you have Richard Nixon. And I think I just dove into this, and once I did, I kind of am a person that overdoes things. And I clearly overdid it, but it became sort of a way of life. And my husband works in Manhattan and I live in Connecticut. And there was a time when I lived in Arizona and he worked in Manhattan.
Wow.
So I know. And he would come home, every other week to Arizona. Then he'd go back to New York for a week. But during that time, I had a lot of time to myself. I have a dog that doesn't like me to go out and leave him for multiple hours at a time. And I started thinking about writing the story. I started doing a little bit of research, but then I realized what was missing. I wrote a large number of words. It may have even been 80,000 words. And when I got done with it, in my mind, I had a book.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read it, I workshopped it up at Skidmore College, and I realized I didn't have a book because my main character was missing. And it also was too simplistic. It was a little love story and it didn't have enough atmosphere. So I signed up for a writing conference, Stockholm Writers Conference, and I went over there and I spent a day at the archives in Sweden. And the archives are amazing because Swedish people are very, very organized and they're also very disciplined. So if somebody looks at the file of letters, they will put them back in the exact same order with the little bow around them and they're perfect. So I took pictures with my phone of about 1,000 pages of letters and I started translating them. And over the years, I've translated a couple hundred of them. I still have some more that I could translate. Mm-hmm. And I started buying books, antique books. Mm-hmm. And I found a way through technology to translate the antique books. Mm-hmm. I have a book scanner, and the book scanner OCRs the text, sure. And then the machine translation translates it. So even though I didn't know Swedish at the time, I was able to read these memoirs that talked about Jacquette and learn more about her. Mm-hmm. And I still didn't have it down. Mm-hmm. I was writing again and it was getting better, but I still didn't have it down. Mm-hmm. And one day I was on Facebook and I searched for my character's name and I saw that a woman in Sweden was writing a biography.
Oh,
and it was crazy. And it was one of those things that you don't know if it's a good fact or a bad fact. And it was kind of a shock because nobody knows anything about this woman, who's my main character. So I emailed Anna-Lena Berg is the author, and she became an excellent friend of mine. I email her every 2 days. And right now I'm editing one of her books that she's translated into English. And nice. So it became kind of like a little vacation. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that my husband's grandparents are Swedish, and that really had nothing to do with me writing the book or being interested in it, but he likes to go to Sweden. So every year we go for a month.
Oh, that's so much fun. That's so much fun. Okay, so you mentioned something I've got to ask because we're very pro dog here on All Things Writing. What kind of dog do you have?
I have a Shih Tzu named Max, and he's 12 years old. And Max's half-brother just won the toy group at the dog show on Thanksgiving that they have in Philadelphia.
I saw his half-brother win. Oh, that's so cool.
Comet. And I didn't want a show dog, but I had had a Shih Tzu before Max who had a lot of health problems. So in my mind, I decided to be very determined, and I lived in Arizona then, and I said, I'm going to get a dog that has a good bloodline. So I found this breeder in Toledo, and I got on a plane and I went and I got the puppy, and he was too friendly to be a show dog. Yeah. So he was, he was sold out to a family. Yeah. And the most crazy thing is his father was named Rocket Power, and he won the toy group at Westminster. His half brother is Comet, who you saw. He also has won the toy group at Westminster and is the #1 dog in the United States of all breeds. But this Tuesday, I was in my apartment building in New York. I hardly ever go down there. My husband goes there. And I came down there for a party for his
Yeah.
office,
Yeah.
and we saw a dog. A guy was carrying a dog, and the face looked just like my dog. And my husband said, "Go ahead, ask him." And I said, "Is your dog from Toledo, Ohio?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "I would know this family of dogs anywhere." It was another half brother. What kind
Oh,
of
that's
dog do you have?
amazing. I have a terrier. She's a mutt. Rat terrier. We think blue tick because of her markings. We think she's part blue tick. She's a stubborn little thing. It's a great dog. I absolutely love her, but I'm more of a Labrador guy. I remind her every day she's not a Labrador. Um, yeah,
A black lab or chocolate lab or
I'm a big fan of Black Labs. I just am. They're
oh,
the
they're nice.
greatest. Yeah, but what's really funny is you mentioned your dog's half brother. I was literally watching the toy group. I saw that Shih Tzu go through its run, and so we always watch the parade, and then we watch the Purina Dog Show every year, like clockwork. My mom does too. Like our whole family, it's a thing. And I watched the Shih Tzu go up and down, and I said, "There's your class winner right there."
Yeah, no, he's a good
Yeah.
dog. Patty Hearst was a part owner
Oh, I
in
didn't know
his
that.
father, and I
Huh.
think Patty Hearst might be a part owner of Comet as well. But Patty Hearst definitely owned his father, and the guy who shows him is also a part owner, and he's the guy who lives in Toledo. And I went to his farm, and there were just all these Shih Tzus running all around the house, and it was amazing.
That
And they
sounds like
never
fun
let
chaos.
Yes, it was chaos, and they don't let them outside in the mud.
Yeah.
It's crazy. They have
Yeah.
a groomer, and the groomer just stands there and grooms the dogs all day. It was really fun.
Oh, that's hilarious. I and see, like I said, sometimes in all things writing, we take a left turn, and I never have any idea where it's going to take us. And there you go. Uh, okay, so you'd mentioned travel. My wife and I love travel. We just recently came back from Crete. I love Italy. We're just nuts about travel. But you traveled extensively through Sweden, part of which is all wrapped up in your book, in your research. Um, it has to be. Well, let me back up. Another question. Was there something when you were going through and researching this character that you came across that genuinely shocked you about her?
Well, I think one thing that genuinely shocked me was she grew up in a troubled family.
Hmm.
Her mother was very ambitious, and her mother managed to divorce her father at a time when it wasn't easy to
Hmm.
divorce. And her mother's second marriage was a marriage for love,
Hmm.
to a guy who was kind of like Thomas Cromwell. He was the chancellor of the court,
Oh,
and he
interesting.
was a self-made man like Thomas Cromwell.
Hmm.
And he was Jacquette's stepfather, and he was a good man.
Hmm.
But during this whole period of divorce, Jacquette had had a very troubled childhood. There was a lot of scandal surrounding her. So she was sent off to be brought up at this castle in the country called Finspång Castle. And it
Mhm.
was the family castle, but her mother didn't really live there, and her mother didn't have anything to do with her. And Siemens
Hmm.
Corporation owns the castle, and no one's allowed in
Oh.
because the family made cannons. And even though cannons are not made anymore, cannons evolved into some other type of defense, aircraft parts for defense contractor type things. So they can't let anybody in here. They don't have the public in the castle. But I had a friend in Stockholm who is a tour guide, and she's Swedish and German. And so she talked to the Siemens Corporation people, and they said, "Well, okay, we have this lady who used to work for Siemens, and she's retired, and she'll take you in, but you're not allowed to take any pictures, and you're
Okay.
not allowed to record anything. You're not allowed to take any notes." And so I said, "Okay," and we went down there, and we went to see the castle. And at one point, uh, one of the big mysteries about Jacquette is her baby.
Hmm.
And nobody admits that it was her baby. Nobody admits it was the prince's baby, but it's widely rumored for 200 years that she and Prince Oscar had a child when she was only 18 and he might have been 16 and a half, very young.
Oh,
They met when they were children basically when they
yeah.
met. And so I went through the castle, and the woman who was touring us around said to me, "I'll show you something." And I said, "Okay." And she said, here's a piece of paper written by Jacquette's grandmother's grandmother, who
Huh.
just died a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And it was the story of what the family believed
Mm-hmm.
about Jacquette. And
Cool.
the baby's name was Ascara,
Mm-hmm.
because the prince was Oscar. They named the baby Ascara. And until the biography came out, no one had ever found out, where this child was brought up, where
Mm-hmm.
the child was born. And my friend Anna Lena, the author, found out. She talked about Ascara and basically said that it's all true. And the woman who was touring us through the castle just looked at me and said, "Ascara?" And she nodded and she said, "Yes." And that was something that people, on Reddit and different forums had been debating for years and years and years. What is
Wow.
known about Jacquette? Was this her baby? Was it Oscar's baby? And that had a big impact on me. Uh, that had a big impact on me. And another thing that had a big impact on me was Jacquette's relationship with her husband,
Mm-hmm.
which I had dismissed it. The whole book was about Oscar. But like
Okay.
everybody else, she couldn't marry the prince. She had to marry someone else.
Yeah.
And in my mind, her husband was kind of, he was kind of a negative personality, kind of a villain in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it that way. And then this woman at Finspång Castle showed me these enameled boxes that Jacquette's husband bought her in Austria because he was the Swedish ambassador to Austria.
Mm-hmm.
And they were beautiful custom paintings of Finspång Castle with all these beautiful scenes on the
Hmm.
sides. And I opened it up, and all her favorite things were inside. There
Oh,
were,
wow.
sewing kits and manicure kits and things like that. And when I saw that box, I realized that there was more to this relationship. It wasn't as
Yeah.
simple as I had it. And those were the kinds of things that influenced me based on my travels.
Wow. That had to have been mind blowing. Uh, walking through the spaces that your character inhabited. Um, I That's got to be a truly, because for me, I mean, I write all fiction, I write horror. Um, I don't really have places that I can walk through that my characters inhabit because they're normally killing people. Um, it's a little bit of a different writing style. It's That is amazing. What other historical materials did you get to handle while you were going through this? Oh, I get before you answer that question. Um, did the castle still look like a castle, or did it look like kind of an office building at this point?
It looked like a castle, and it was really interesting to go to because her family were Walloons, and
Mm-hmm.
they were from what is today Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was Holland.
Mm-hmm.
And when they came over, their castle was not a typical Swedish Baroque castle. It was kind of Dutch and a little more compact, a little more symmetrical.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot about the architecture that influenced me. So yeah, walking in these different spaces was very, very instructive. And she became a lady in waiting at the palace.
Mm-hmm.
And walking through the different palaces they have different personalities. And Jacquette actually hated Stockholm. She spent a lot of time in Stockholm, but she hated it. And walking through Stockholm Palace, it's so different and
Mm-hmm.
so much colder than the other palaces. And it helped me to write the different scenes, to just be in these places.
That's so cool. I absolutely think that is so immersive in terms of that storytelling, your storytelling and your research that came into it. When you started out this research, did you have a goal in mind for what you wanted to ultimately uncover?
I wanted to tell a story of a tragic, impossible love. And I think that's what primarily drove me.
Hmm.
And all the research came in as part of the texture of that, because the politics, the alliances, the the coup that occurred, the revolution in Sweden, the uncertainty of the new dynasty, all that added danger and tension
Mm-hmm.
and provided the reason why these two people couldn't be together. Like in Romeo and Juliet, the families were traditional enemies. That's why they couldn't be together.
Right.
In this story, Oscar's family, Bernadotte, was a commoner.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, the age of revolutions was over. Napoleon was on he was on Elba at the time my book begins. Well, he was almost on Elba when my book begins. And the crowned heads of Europe were kind of taking back over. The Ancien regime was taking back over Europe. And they viewed Bernadotte as kind of a vestige of this revolutionary time. And they really wanted to get rid of him. So he only had one child, and that was Oscar. And it became very, very important from a very early time that Oscar marry someone who was royal, not Jacquette. And the nobles were divided in Sweden. The nobles were demanding that Oscar get married at a very early age. And because of this division in the nobles, that made it even more important that Oscar could not marry a noble, because that would be taking the side of one noble family over the others.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that that could cause some problems. Now, so like I said, you didn't just dip your toe into these waters; you dove straight in, learning Swedish, and visiting and all that stuff. Language is an interesting vehicle for any one of us. I'm currently working on well, I'm much better in German than I am in Italian, but I'm working on Italian too at the same time because I'm a glutton for punishment. But anyway, how did the learning of the Swedish language influence your understanding of the culture, the character? How did it add to the depth of your writing? Because I don't think that's a lot of things that us fiction writers think about doing, going that far.
Well, especially because this was a book that involved government and power structures, it became really interesting to me that there weren't words in the English language that
Mm-hmm.
corresponded to the different institutions, the different positions. And that was one reason I started very early, even just looking on the online dictionary
Mm-hmm.
and translating things. And first, I was able to read pretty well. And at this point, I can say I can read Swedish fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to be able to consume things like podcasts and YouTubes
Yeah.
and listen to lectures and watch documentaries. And so I really wanted to learn the spoken language. And it's actually, for me, very difficult
Mm-hmm.
because I learned French and, the Spanish and French and the Romance languages when I was very young, and those were easy for me.
Yeah.
But learning a language that's, it's a Germanic language, it's a Norse language. I do not know German. It
Yeah.
was very difficult. And Swedish is a funny spoken language because they don't pronounce all the letters. And one of the exercises that our class did when we first started learning Swedish was cross out the letters that are not pronounced. And every word would have 2 or 3 letters that you don't pronounce. And if there's no rules, you don't know what to do. But it really did add a lot to be able to understand the different institutions, and the different family dynamics were more understandable in Swedish. But I was very, very lucky that Bernadotte was French, because most of the family letters, including Jacquette's, were written in French.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able, I'd say 75% were in French,
Okay.
and 25% were in Swedish. And the really interesting thing was, when they wanted to say something shocking, they wrote the letter in Swedish. And so some of the most important letters were in Swedish.
Oh, fun. That is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So German, I'll tell you, German's hard because in German, when you start dealing with German articles, even the Germans will admit it's a train wreck. It's an absolute train wreck. There's like 16 different ways to say the, and it just depends on the word. It's an utter ridiculous language, but that's okay. I still enjoy knowing it anyway. Oh, well, that is very interesting, and I think it does. I think knowing the language and studying up on the language influences so much of your learning a language changes your brain. I am always telling my listeners, challenge yourself, work on learning a foreign language, work on appreciating art, because all these things add to your mental toolkit that you can use when you're writing. Historical fiction is fascinating. It's a huge market. It really is sort of blown up, and people are totally into it. You have the challenge of balancing the historical accuracy with the dramatic license that you have to build in to make it readable. Where are you on drawing that line? How do you know you've gone too far, or how do you know if you haven't gone far enough?
I think for me, the basic requirement is that I know the history as inside and out as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And once I feel that I know what happened and where the characters were at particular times, what could have happened, what could not have happened, which characters were allies, which characters were enemies, and things like that, I feel pretty free to bend the historical record. In my case, I used a timeline program, Aeon Timeline, and I have a timeline that has 5,000 entries. I mean, it's really big. And I put the letters in there. I put facts from the books that I translated in there, and I put big historical events in the world in there. And when I was writing the book, I would refer to the timeline and see, could Oscar have been there? Or was he in Norway? Because he was in Norway half the time. And I tried to always put characters in places where they could have been. Mm-hmm. I tried to have my characters meet at places where they actually did meet. I tried to have them say things that they actually did say. Because at least in the case of someone like Oscar, a lot is known because he was the heir to the throne and people kept tabs on him.
Sure.
On the other hand, someone like Jacquette, not as much is known about where she is. I had the letters, I had some other things. So what I did is something that I've admired in other books, which is I tried to bend the historical record and insert fictional anecdotes for a purpose. And usually the purpose was to try to avoid too much backstory and try to get my character closer into the action and get the reader closer to the character. So, for example, I have a historical note at the end of the book that explains the major instances of this. But in the first few drafts of the novel, the beta readers were really confused about who this pretender to the throne was, and if he was the real crown prince. Why did Bernadotte get brought in? How did this all happen? And it was very important to the book that the reader understand that Crown Prince Gustav, who is in exile in Germany, has supporters in Sweden and continued to have supporters in Sweden for 15 years after Bernadotte came to Sweden, including after he was king. So I took something that probably didn't happen, and I'm quite sure it didn't happen. In the beginning of the book, Oscar and Jaquette meet at Drottningholm Palace when Jaquette is 14 and Oscar is only 12. They're both at a very tumultuous time in her life, in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
She has just had her parents divorce. He just got told, you're leaving Paris and going to this country called Sweden, and you're now a prince, despite the fact that you were just a regular kid before.
Mm-hmm.
So they meet each other, and neither one of them is feeling very secure. And I wanted the reader to understand why Oscar's father was having pictures of the pretender seized, which is something he actually did. People would have little pictures of the former crown prince, and they would get this stuff and, toss it in the trash because it was seen as, contraband or treasonous or something like that. So I had Jaquette find some documents that tended to prove that Crown Prince Gustave was not illegitimate. There had been some rumors that Bernadotte was spreading around that he was illegitimate and he could never return to Sweden and become king anyway. And there were documents like this floating around. I think Axel von Fersen was suspected to have some, but there was never indication that Jaquette had these. And to kind of put it in more real terms, I had her entrusted with a letterbox that when she opened it up, she found these documents. And she had just met Oscar, which was true. And she was obsessed with Oscar, which was also true. But when she found these documents, she was put to a choice of, these documents are obviously bad for Oscar. They support the pretender to the throne. Do I destroy them? Do I hide them? Do I report them and give them to somebody? And even though that was fictional, it really explained to my beta readers why this was so real. Why was this a really threatening fact for the Bernadottes? So that was one example. And there were a couple of instances where I did something like that. So often when I think about this, I can understand writers who want to stick very, very closely to the historical record. I think when you have a character like Jaquette or a lot of other women, because those women's lives were not documented as much, maybe they weren't in a prominent position, I think it's more maybe effective, maybe allowable to kind of insert some historical record. On the other hand, if I were Hilary Mantel and I were writing about Thomas Cromwell, everybody knows where he was, what he did, and the only thing you can invent is his personality, really.
Yeah.
So I think in my case, that's how I did it. I don't know if I would do it that way if I were writing about a character, like Napoleon or something who's well documented.
Well, I'm always intrigued with historical fiction because it requires the finesse of a fiction writer and the dogged pursuit of historical facts that a nonfiction writer has. So it's an interesting marriage of talents, really. And so I'm always in awe of people that can do that. And you certainly seem to have done that in Butterfly Games, which is so cool, which is so very cool. It comes out in January?
January 20th.
January 20th. Okay, well, I will make sure and get, at the end of this video, I will put the QR code so people can scan it and go out and find it. But for people who cannot scan it because they're watching the episode on their phone, because you can't really scan your phone while you're watching it, where can people find Butterfly Games?
It's distributed by Simon & Schuster and is available wherever books are sold. And you can find out more at my website, which is kellyscarborough.com.
kellyscarborough.com. Okay, I can, with the magic of editing, I'm going to put that up on the screen now. See? Bling. Wow, it's amazing. It's just like magic. It's amazing how that happens. Great. So, Kelly, it was wonderful talking with you today. I really appreciate you taking the time because it takes a little extra time to get out, and we love to talk about our books.
And our dogs.
And our dogs, absolutely. Wow, what an interesting link. Who knew that our few degrees of separation was not going to be Kevin Bacon, but was going to be a prize-winning Purina toy category winner?
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. I hope you get to North Carolina.
Well, as I like to say, that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen. It's definitely in the plans. Well, so I want to thank you, wonderful listeners, for joining us today. I know I always learn a little bit whenever I do these interviews, and I hope you get to learn a little bit about the wonderful guests I have on. This is the last interview of 2025, by the way. Look for more in 2026. But anyway, on behalf of my wonderful guest, Kelly, and myself, Brian, the writer, this is All Things Writing, signing off. This has been another amazing episode of All Things Writing. If you heard something that got your wheels spinning, check out the links in the show notes. Also, please follow the show and remember to leave those reviews. Those simple acts of kindness mean the world to us. Hop on over to briannowak.com, and that is Brian with a Y, and check out my latest novels. I'm on Amazon or wherever you buy your ebooks. And as a reminder, the music you heard on the show today was used under license from the artist Ryan Ancona. Thanks for listening to the show, and have a blessed day.